Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Catalano. I'm joined today by Virju Patel from Data Maverick, a consultancy specializing in data and AI. As businesses increasingly look for ways to leverage AI to drive growth, we thought it would be valuable to tap into Virju's expertise. With a career dedicated to helping organizations extract actionable insights from their data, Virju brings a wealth of knowledge that we're excited to share with you today. Virju, with your 20 years of experience dealing with data and your most recent stint at Databricks, and now as a data consultancy, I'd love to know how you've seen data adoption evolve.
I guess the story from dealing with data over the past 20 years is certainly changed, but it's definitely almost in the same story. Data explosion has definitely occurred with the early days of 2010, where we were all early stage talking about big data and cloud. But then as I spent time at a reseller, that's when I was helping customers decide what tech stack to grow on for the foundation. But then as of more recently, I spent 3.5 years at Databricks, and boy, was that an eye opener for me. Another big piece was data lakes and what is a lake house? These come up quite often. I think customers, they may not get to that question right away, depending on the persona that you're speaking to. But customers want to know, how can I use these toolings today to improve efficiencies, increase revenue, or optimize my existing stack? But now with the explosion of AI, the ambition, it's where do I use this? How do I place this into my active roadmap of my business? And that's currently what we're doing today at Data Maverick. We went from storing everything to wanting to use everything to not knowing how to start, is where we are.
Yeah, I've seen very similar, in my travels around. What do you think the biggest misconception you're seeing in the market around AI is?
I would say that AI is kind of a plug and play box. That's not the case. Most companies conflate the tools with transformation. I think the gap really becomes what's technically possible and what's business relevant. It's not about adding AI. It's about removing the friction and easier to make decisions. I work with this industrial manufacturing company. They were connecting major OEMs with like major large car manufacturers like Toyota and Mitsubishi, and they were buying parts from Denso and other smaller microcontroller companies like Ingram and so forth, and hundreds of others. So the distribution arm, if you think about a car, there's thousands of parts, and they have lots of different parts that are required for each car to ship. And the distribution arm in the middle was selling almost $4 million in RMAs. So basically, they were selling things that weren't on the inventory list. So there was a mismatch of what was available to sell versus what wasn't. So this came to connecting various databases from their on-prem architecture to their cloud architecture. And the first resolution to getting all this was, where's my single source of truth of data? The misconception, I would say, is the dedication. It's the investment. Staring at a moving ship of AI versus making a move. It was, we always talked about this at Databricks, which is it's speed dating. At some point, you need to walk over, say hello, and the rest is history.
Yeah, funny you brought up starting versus making a move. I liken to say that, and I'm seeing a very similar thing that you are, in that people need to know they need to start moving, but because they don't know the true direction that they need to go in, they tend to not move. So, for example, a business, knows that they got to go, but I don't know if it's, should I be going 270 degrees west? Should I be going 90 degrees east? My perspective is, it's west, right? You don't know if it's 268 degrees, 275 degrees, but we know it's west. Start taking the steps, course correct as you go. How has the evolution from traditional data storage to modern AI applications impacted data accessibility and management, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think evolution is, we've seen this before, right? It was transition from physical to VMs, and now it's like, oh, okay, wait, now I can only put 5 VMs on a server, and they're like, wait a second, now you can put 30, and then eventually it went to 60. So then it was all about, what is it capable of? And then the problem then became, how many licenses does every single database have? So now we've grown the VM count, on a per VM basis, on a per physical server basis. But then it's like, wait, my licensing cost on SQL, Oracle, and whatever database software you use changed. And then you're like, oh, wait a second. Now that we've virtualized it and we have all these databases, let's move it to the cloud because that's my DR function. So it's literally the same story being told again, but now the data that gets attached to it is significant, and everyone wants it now in some chatbot using some RAG model. So you have to pause and say, wait a second, what does my enterprise really want? Um, and where do you begin, and how fast do you need it? Is it real time? So you need a brand new data strategy, and that starts from the beginning. What is your business problem, and how are you, how do you perceive to fix it, and what does it bring true value to the business? Because if we don't get down to those fundamentals, it'll be challenging. There was always one easy story that I would share with customers that resonated well. It's just like pretending like you're moving from one house to another. Um, you go to each room, you go to your kitchen, you put all your kitchen items in a box, and the moving truck comes and you take all those boxes and you move to the other, move locally or wherever you're moving to. And just imagine if you didn't label that box and you got there and you wanted to have, you know, a few people over, some neighbors, and your wife's like, "Hey, let's get those wine glasses out." That's called data messy or data freshness and data quality. These all things are relevant, and this is all cataloged really nicely in a data catalog. So if you didn't take these data principles at the very early stages of your database environment, you're going to have to go back in time and fix those pieces to build another fresh foundation.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I think anybody who's ever moved can absolutely relate to that story. What do you think the biggest bottleneck is for customers who want to go from a proof of concept over to a production AI deployment?
Yeah, it's never been tech. It's always been, there's no clear owner or who owns the business problem and really understands all the metrics that can support it. And when you do the discovery of basic use cases, I think you'll quickly find that it's either disconnected systems or lack of data quality, or who did what along the value chain and observability. We call it shadow AI projects, where everyone's kind of doing some unique thing in each department, but there's no clear business stakeholder that's responsible for the success of it. Uh, and then it's like, tech should work. It's a promised land. It's not. It goes back to the beginning days. You have to find a product manager. Hey, we have a problem that we want to solve, and you go from there. I was dealing with this one customer. They had hundreds of thousands of images they were dealing with daily, and they needed to scrape the images very accurately. It's a pretty long story, so I'll cut to the chase. They needed the accuracy to be basically near 99 to 100% accurate. AI doesn't deliver 99 or 100% out of the gate. So we picked the best model, I think, on Hugging Face. It was open source, and the accuracy out of the gate with no fine tuning was 66%. And then the follow up question was, well, why didn't you fine tune the model? Why didn't you give it some ideas or at least some samples? And it quickly became, it's like, wait a second, if I go from 66 to 80 or 85%, the business owner is never going to allow that. So do you spend time buying H100 GPUs with liquid cooling? No, it was about, is this going to get me to where I need to go quickly? And if not, then I have to quickly pivot.
How do you think businesses should leverage things like Dell Technologies to integrate AI into their existing workflows? I have some thoughts here, but let me hear what you think.
Yeah, I read an interesting quote recently by John Rose, the global chief technology officer and chief AI officer at Dell. It was prioritize ROI first. If you can't measure the outcome, then you're not ready to scale. I always feel that starting with an MVP is the best approach. Start with a small functional model. Like, take what you do as your existing process and kind of demonstrate the steps. I do X, Y, Z in order to, here are all the inputs and here are all the outputs, and that's how we do it today. And if we kind of chase that back and say, hey, now let's change the tech stack. Can we do it faster, cheaper, and more scalable? That's how you can really easily define. Right. And then we kind of switch into the next step, which you probably have more familiarity with, at Melillo, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So once you've created that MVP, right? The next step in the process, right? You can get a hold of, let's say, a Dell GPU accelerated AI kit that will allow you to demonstrate that problem that you're solving, right? And that allows the business to then really see that this thing actually works, right? Now you've got that, you've taken that step, right? Now we got to scale this even larger, right? So at that point, we might look at something like Dell's secure AI factory, right? That helps create that full architecture for an organization so that they can leverage it internally as well as serve it securely to their customers externally. So yeah, that seems like a great roadmap to get from kind of zero up to speed.
Absolutely.
Virgil, thanks for spending the time today to talk all things AI. Great catching up with you, and look forward to continuing this conversation down the road.